And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit more about how we come into the traumas that we have early in life, the early adversity wounds that really inform whether we're able to truth tell and whether we're able to speak our yeses and our nos. And these leaks, when we don't set boundaries, when we don't get out of confusion and not being clear, this is what holds us back from actually, delivering our ministry, delivering our mission, doing our divine work in the world, and receiving greatly, really embodying prosperity. And so that's why, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I talk a lot about childhood wounds and traumas, because a lot of the personal development industry only talks about law of attraction, which is awesome, and positive thinking and mindset. The problem with that, though, is that there's a big piece missing. And I just want to let you know, right, why that is. So a lot of us, in a shortened way of explaining it to you, a lot of us, if we've had early adversity, early childhood wounds where our parents weren't able to mostly emotionally meet us. Now, there could be other forms of trauma and abuse, even, higher scale trauma, which is physical trauma, sexual trauma, and things like that. I'm not specifically talking about that, but likely if you had that, then you definitely had emotional trauma. One of the things that happens if we have emotional trauma, and I'll explain what that is in a second, that we move out of our body and we move into our head to survive, okay? And so we start intellectualizing everything. And this is actually a trauma for our body early on in life. When we're a child, we don't know how to deal with rejection or not feeling loved and cared for, and especially not feeling safe, okay? And so if we don't feel safe, then we start to think, or we move out of our body and we start to look for ways that we can survive. This is just a natural human instinct. When we don't feel that someone else has got our back and is totally taking care of us and we can be free to be who we are, then we start to try to work it out. We try to analyze it. We try to use logic. And this is way too early for us in our early development to do this. So then let me go back to where I just was, which is a lot of us have been taught mindset and law of attraction and these kinds of ways to get what we want in life, which is amazing. To realize that you're a co-creator on this planet, that you're not a victim, this is a huge step forward in awakening, right? In the evolution of humanity. The problem, though, with that is that if you still have these wounds that happened really early on in your body, like in your heart and in your stomach, in your solar plexus, and even in your sacral center, so your sensual center, which is sensation of safety and pleasure, okay? If there were wounds there and you weren't met there as a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, you literally moved out of that part of your body and you moved into your head. And so the mindset stuff that you've been learning potentially to create what you want in life is really just feeding your head, feeding your head, feeding your head. But these wounds that still haven't been tended to, it's okay, it's not a negative thing. We actually all have it. But the thing is that if we don't do the work to integrate it, there really are shadows. They actually just dictate everything that's going on in our life unconsciously. So no matter how much conscious practice we put into intellect, okay, cool. And no matter how much practice we put into trying to intellectually create something consciously, our subconscious and our unconscious dictates us. And so that's where we get into neuroscience, the understanding that there really is this brain-body connection. And if you just try to work from your brain, you're never going to get the results that you want because you're not in sync with your body. Your heart and your womb, especially as a woman, have a lot to do with your capacity to hold wealth, to be visible, to take action, because these are all wounds from the past. Okay, so I'm going to talk a lot more in the coming days and weeks around the wounds, the childhood imprint wounds like inaction, which is really procrastination and visibility and all these things that really hold us back Most women that I'm seeing, that I talk to every single day, this is why they haven't created their work in the world, or why they're not, receiving abundance and prosperity at the levels that they want. Talita, sister. So today, though, I just wanted to, because I have a call in a few minutes, so this is going to be a pretty short live, but I just wanted to pop on and talk a little bit around boundaries. So all that I just talked about, let's go into boundaries here. So if we had an emotional wound when we were a child, that maybe we weren't safe or we weren't loved for the fullness of who we are, and again, no blame on our parents. Our parents did the best they could with what they knew. Hi, love. But they might not have been able, right? They might not have had the capacity to handle, a child who was upset. They might have been dealing with, like in my personal case, my dad was an alcoholic, and my mom was a single mom, I guess, for most of our lives after they got divorced. And so for a lot of that, like, she was really just living in survival, right? Which is like, she kept the roof over our head, and we went to a really good private school, and we had like a bed to sleep in at night, and we had clothes, and all the outer things were taken care of. But she didn't have the capacity to meet me emotionally, like really and truly deeply. And so a lot of us have that wound running, where if we weren't met emotionally, then we learn to orient out. We learn to put our attention more on other people than ourselves. And so what that causes is us being more concerned with what other people think and what other people feel than with what we feel. We're also conditionally conditioned to not be selfish, because that's a bad thing, right? So it's a virtue to care about other people. And the problem with that, though, when it comes from a wound, is that we become codependent, and we also fear visibility. We fear people seeing us and rejecting us, because we never felt truly met and heard and tended to and loved for exactly who we were from early on in life. And so when that happens and we have this wound running, we also find it really hard to set boundaries. We find it really hard to tell someone yes or no. We find it really hard to even say no to someone, like, thank you for your offer, but no, like, that's not in alignment for me right now, or that's not what I want right now. The reason for that is a lot of reasons. One, we're afraid to disappoint someone, right? Because our value of how we're loved is how other people feel about us. So to disappoint someone means that they might not love us, which means that we're not lovable, which is not true. Essentially, that comes from an early place in life that we learned that. And that's just a wound that needs to be cleared up. The other reason that we fail to set boundaries is we're not even clear what our fucking boundaries are. Like, we learn to orient out toward other people from such early on in life and please everyone else around us that we don't even have connection to ourselves. We literally live so much probably in our head, in our analytics and logic, because we're trying to figure out if we're safe and if we're loved and if we're gonna be okay, survival, that we're not even in our body. And when you come into your body, when you start doing embodiment practices, that's when you start to come into relationship with yourself. And that's the point where you start to actually hear your truth and hear what your yes is and what your no is. And you have clarity and you start to move out of confusion, and then you're able to speak it. You sort of come slowly as you start to do this work. But I want to just leave you with this. This isn't just a conversation around boundaries or emotional trauma. This is a conversation around women in leadership and how we are literally avoidant and not attracting or receiving to the levels that we can, both intimacy and prosperity, because these wounds are running and they're energy leaks. So to the extent you leave people hanging, you don't complete conversations, you don't tell them yes or no, and you just kind of leave things scattered out there, and you let people think certain things just because you don't want to tell them no or whatever, like all of this kind of ambiguous stuff, this comes down to energy leaks and boundaries, and it actually diverts prosperity in all forms, wealth, love, like all the things that you want to experience more joy in your life. It diverts it from you because you're leaking energy. Because our goal is to become sovereign in embodiment, like in human embodiment, and then also our spiritual connection to the highest. So that's what I have. I think I'm going to stop here because I could talk about this forever. I love you all. If you want support in this area, please reach out to me, DM me, and myself or my business manager will get back to you. And we have amazing programs, and I also do private work in this area for women who really want to just take their work to the next level, but know that this is the stuff that's holding them back. We can't just put strategy and structures, like business strategy and structures, and we can't just put mindset, band-aids on this stuff. This is the stuff that changes our life from like deep down in our relationships, because that's really what we all want. Our client relationships, our love relationships, our family relationships, and our relationship with ourselves first and foremost. And that's when like the money support comes, right? Because this is just a relationship as well that we have. Love you. I have to hop on a client call. So glad you were here, and I'll talk to you soon.